Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Marm. I'm a Special Forces, recently retired Special Forces veteran. I'm a graduate of the Bancroft Capital's Veteran Training Program. Welcome to this quarter's, make sure. Yep. Welcome to this quarter's Patriot Lunch featuring Brian White, a soon-to-be retiring U.S. Army Information Operations Officer. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, great to see you. So I put together this event. Now it's about maybe a year and a half ago, because I wanted to highlight one high-performing transitioning military veteran to a broad spectrum of corporate America, to our audience and to Bancroft Capital's clients and friends. Because I wanted to break down that barrier between corporate America and the transitioning veteran population. I found it was very hard when I was transitioning. I couldn't really reach out and gain that access. And so I realized that corporate America doesn't have the ability, the access to best understand these unique skill sets and experience and leadership that transition veterans bring to bring to your industries and your company. So that's where we are now. It's iterated. It's gotten iteratively a lot better, and there's just so much quality out there. And Brian White is going to be highlighted today. On it. That was weird. So at the end of this dialogue, we have time to at the end of this conversation with Brian, we have time to dialogue with the audience. So raise your hand. You can text a note or a message, and we'll get you in the queue, and you can dialogue with Brian. I'm going to give you a brief overview of Bancroft Capital, a brief overview of Brian. Brian's going to introduce himself, and we'll get into the dialogue, nice and easy. So most of you know about Bancroft Capital's special mission and our line of business. Bancroft Capital is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business that operates as an institutional broker-dealer and a small investment bank. And we have a best-in-class veteran training program, of which I am a graduate. We accomplished that mission through, of training and empowering military veterans through the veteran training program, through the core lines of business, and those core the proceeds of those core lines of business pay for the mission to bring military veterans into the industry. The core lines of business are cash management, public finance, fixed income, secondary trading market, and debt and equity capital markets desk, and an investment bank as well. So please remember Bancroft Capital should you ever need those services. So now for the main event, Brian White. Make sure we are straight on the, okay, we're good, thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Brian White is a soon-to-be transitioning military officer. He is an information operations officer with incredible experience throughout Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. He's smart. He's a quick learner. He's a clear thinker. He leads with compassion and understanding, and you'll see that as you talk through and you'll listen through this, because he's done the spectrum. He started out as a private. He went 24 years. He's been in the trenches, and he's been at multi-star, very high senior level staffs. As an information operations officer, Brian is highly skilled in analyzing and developing plans that influence our adversaries' behavior. Think about the combination between strategic communications, military deception, information warfare, trying to get your adversary to do what you want them to do. And it requires thinking at echelon and multi-levels. Brian started out as a private, like I said, retiring after 24 years as lieutenant colonel. He's got about 4 or 5 months left in the military. And this is where this Patriot Lunch comes in. And we're going to help him understand various opportunities and industries out there. I would love it if you had a conversation with each and every one of you in the audience afterwards, just to understand what's going on, help broaden his network, and help him kind of turn the corner and get into this next season of life. So I talked a lot, Brian. We're super grateful for you Glad to have you on board with this Patriot Lunch and excited to dialogue. Please open it up with a personal introduction.
Hey, thanks, Will. That was, I'm humbled by your words there. I don't know how really I can top it at all, but I just want to thank you for inviting me and the great folks at Bancroft Capital, supporting the veteran community through this opportunity to share our story. This is a great event. I understand it will go out, and hopefully I can represent what our service means to each and every one of the Americans that we are sacrificing for. So a little bit about me. I came from a small town in Iowa, where growing up, I valued service, sacrifice, and hard work. I joined the Army 2 weeks after college, in fact, really for a higher purpose, something bigger than myself, and really just stayed for the people, stayed for the mission. 9/11 happened, 4 years after I joined. So then that purpose was really put to the test. So I wanted to stick around. Spent the first 10 years leading diverse international teams of 2 up to 180 in Iraq and Afghanistan, making decisions, motivating others towards action. The last 10 years of my career spent collaborating across a broad cross section of staffs, like Will mentioned, at different echelons from the 06 level all the way up to a 4-star corporate level. Really developing strategic plans, managing projects, and evaluating, assessing $1 million of resources that were allocated for result-driven organizations. I think out of that experience, my passion started to develop, really developing the people, teams, processes, and products to achieve results. And my core values really defined are my faith, which grounds me in humility and resilience. My family, which is my motivation for all my pursuits. Integrity, sound principles of courage, empathy, commitment, and then excellence. Strive in all facets of life to approach, with a continuing attitude of improvement and just try to be the best that I can be. So that's a little bit about myself here. And
That's great. Yeah, Brian, thanks. Yeah, I love the way you finished that. Be the best you can be. Because I think you probably joined the Army when that was the motto.
I was, that was one of the influencing facts. It's come full circle. So
It sure has. For the audience, they're the recruiting people are talking about bringing that. I think they already had maybe brought back that motto.
Yep.
I get, if it works, right?
Right.
Clearly it works because they instilled that motto, and you're going to wrap up 24 solid years, still trying to be the best you can be,
and being in the influencing game, depending on what they put out for products, I might just pull that packet and just keep rolling. Who knows? But
it worked, right? Yeah, good for you. And what's really neat, and I'd love to pull this thread through our conversation, is how your experience at influencing matters to every industry, to every company, because that's what companies try to do. They want to influence the target audience. They want to influence the product purchaser or the supplier or the vendor or the clients or whatever. There has to be stuff in there. They have to take that into account. And I don't know if there's really, besides like a marketing team, I don't know if there's like a core specialty that trains on that. There's marketing teams. Those are also quite niche too. So, hey, we're going to get into a few stories here, folks. Brian and I have kind of worked out, a lineup and just some interesting things to talk about and pull out some lessons connected to the audience. And the first one I'd like to talk through, Brian, is what some of the actions. So Brian's got several combat deployments to Afghanistan, and with all trips, some are harder than others. You had one that was particularly challenging and for a particular event. Can you talk through that?
Yeah. Thanks, Will. Um, so as a kind of mid-level leader of a company of about 100 and 180 soldiers, um, we were in southern Afghanistan, Kandahar province. I was in kind of out in the country, if you will. And we were getting early reports of enemy near our base of operations, and they were traveling through this real small village, and then just kind of set the scene for these villages in this particular part of Afghanistan. They were constructed thick concrete, some thick mud walls, mud floors inside with rugs, very traditional garb by the local folks, in terms of what looked like kind of a single man dress, they would call, and sandals, with turbans. And so folks are always walking all through the villages. In this particular one, so again, reports that we have some enemy that are transitioning through or staying overnight in this particular village. So my task was to go up and really this is where my initial what I saw as initial networking, if you will. So my task was to go up. This village had a weekly meeting that I had a seat at. And again, I'd only been in country for about 30 days, so I was brand new. The village elders and the influencers, the decision makers of this village, they knew that. They knew I was definitely new. And my job was to go up there and network with as many people as I could who would want to talk to an American soldier, and not a lot did. But I knew at a minimum, the influencers and the elders would want to come and raise concerns or welcome me or in our unit. And so as I sat in this very small, almost felt like a dungeon kind of a room. I had myself and my recorder of the meeting sitting in there with me, note taker, and it was a little intimidating at first, but it'd probably get 20 or 30. I mean, I'm talking real senior folks, elders of the community. And all of a sudden, they they start just kind of going right at me for voicing their concerns of our presence there was harming and causing the security risk. They it was our fault for everything that was going on. And hey, we need you to build a school. And so I'm sitting there quickly taking this all in, and taking all these barbs from the locals, just listening, just trying to learn, trying to get a question in to further my understanding of what their concerns were. Not rush to any commitments, because I knew just through my training and just talking with other leaders within my Army unit, you make commitments, and then they'll hold you to that. And if you're not fulfilling that commitment fairly quick, things could get worse for you. So I'm taking all this in, and and they wanted decisions right on the spot. And my ability to deflect at that time, not really very good. My ability to sit there and take some of some of these hard charges that were thrown at really the U.S. Army, my predecessor. And so I told them I would continue to assess the situation. I would go back to my chain of command. I had all kinds of replies just to try to keep them at ease. And so so we left the meeting on maybe a neutral kind of tone. They said, hey, yeah, well, we want you to come back. So I took that as a success. And so as I'm leaving town then, and there's probably roughly 4 or 5 of our vehicles as we're driving. I mean, we're barely out of the town, and I'm only 3-4 miles from where I'm staying. And all of a sudden, an IED goes off. It hits my vehicle, and thankfully, just through the construction and the manufacturing of these vehicles, the IED hit right underneath my feet. and my drivers, and it blew off the engine, but it blew it away from the rest of the vehicle. And that was, really, one, it was kind of the location where the explosion happened, but two is the just the manufacturing of that vehicle to keep us safe in an event like that. That was a perfect scenario of an event that happened to us. And I can remember my driver, who in a previous deployment was a Purple Heart recipient who got hit by an IED. I can remember him like just lashing out. He's a sir, we've died. I was just like, no, we haven't died. But all of a sudden, just going, the switch of sitting, listening, trying to have some humility, talking with these elders, to all of a sudden, my life, we could have died, right? And so the switch of the hat, and then having to be, okay, a leader, calling back to my headquarters, kind of arranging additional security, trying to assess the situation, and then but not letting that one incident impact my relationship with those elders and with that village. So there was a period where, hey, we kind of disconnected, we stayed away, but over time, I continued to network in that village. I continue to reach back out, to the elder, to the decision makers, and just to persevere and try to understand from their perspective of, hey, who's trying to kill me, but who's trying to kill U.S. forces, but also what are their concerns, and how I could provide some assistance. And so not taking that one incident and letting it ruin a relationship, or really not letting a relationship start. And the result was, hey, over time, they would freely come to me, let me know what was going on. And then I, in turn, was able to not get them a school, but get them, a base of operations for their Afghan forces that were in their village. And so there was kind of a mutual negotiation and understanding, I think, that came out of that. So. Yeah,
that sounds like I mean, there's so much in there, right? So you've got the complexity of a massively dynamic environment. So culture, language, allegiances and loyalties, throw in a bunch of American money, throw in security, and then event happens, and thank goodness you and your driver are okay. Hopefully everyone else in the vehicle, and you're able to overcome those setbacks. It's my initial thought is, how hard would it be to go back to that village elder and those key influencers to try to accomplish your original intent, when that they probably know the person who has set that in place, that explosive device that targeted you. And so, you have to have maturity, you have to have, an overriding desire to accomplish the mission versus taking care of your own personal security and safety. And so, that's the hallmark of, every single, veteran that's been in those situations. So I praise you. I allowed your efforts for staying focused on the end game, which was really important. You got obviously everyone needs to make halftime adjustments, but be focused on that full game. And so really interesting situation there. Listen, let's talk about service, and kind of talk about your concept of service. And I'll intro it with a conversation that my son and I had, a freshman in high school. Of course, it's like 10 p.m. and he's like, I got a homework assignment due tomorrow, Dad. Oh no, what is it? And he says he's got to write a poem about service. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, we could talk about it. I can kind of chum the water some for you. And he said his teacher kind of just opened it and said, hey, you can't serve what you hate. So I pulled the thread on that, and you have to love what you serve. You have to love your family, your community, your faith. And therefore you because you love them, you want to serve them. So can you talk us through, maybe a situation or a job or, an environment where you could kind of exemplifies your idea of service?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, thanks, Will. So as you know, the training, so we're always training, for that physical fight, where it's ingrained in us of, all the physical training we doing, the training, the maneuvers that we do, the proficiency with our weapons, everything is geared toward that enemy of our country that we want to close with and, destroy. So it's ingrained in us to want to do that. And, some within the culture, it's like, if you're not always focused on that, if you're not out, in the rain and doing the 25-mile road march and under nods and cold weather, then, you're lesser of a soldier. So it's naturally that camaraderie that kind of keeps you going and keeps you motivated. But I had a situation where our first child was about to be due, and the unit was deploying to Iraq, and this is the 2006 timeframe and 7 timeframe, in a real violent time in Iraq. The surge period there, where we started sending over many more additional soldiers and stuff, and it was afforded me the opportunity to stay back and be the battalion, a rear detachment commander, a commander of about 900 soldiers, but in their rear, and really take care of their families. And so this was a very junior level leadership, not as much, and you're still got that mentality of closing with and destroying the enemy. And now it's like, hey, I want you to take care of my most precious beings, and that's my wife and my kids or my grandparents or relatives or whatever. And so that was definitely a mental shift. And the key to your point about service is that, hey, now there's no one running to this job. There's no one that's jumping on to serve families. I serve to give my life for this country, and I want to be over there with my soldiers or my teammates and, close with and destroy that enemy. I got to answer questions about kids not going to school, or kids maybe taken from the state, from the daycare, or all these, kind of random situations. And particularly during this deployment, and it was a very violent one for my organization when they were overseas. We had a situation where there was a few soldiers that were captured by the enemy. And so information already doesn't necessarily flow back to me very well, because everyone's focused in trying to stay safe and do the mission, in Iraq. And so and families are obviously free to write and talk to their own loved ones overseas. And so they get this picture and they get the story from their loved one. And then here I'm kind of painting a bigger picture of what's going on. And, sometimes it's not quite as bad as what they think. And sometimes I think it's worse than what they think. And so there's this ongoing back and forth on really clear communication. And is Brian being, forthright and honest and really clear on what does he really know? And, because if I'm feeding, everybody can pick up, the dishonest person in the room and someone who's trying to elevate maybe their stature, and all of a sudden you're discredited and not trusted. And then, how can you potentially lead, in a bad situation? And so we entered a bad situation where we had some soldiers that were captured, and not knowing if those soldiers' families were immediately with me in New York, or if they were in some other part of the country. And then once, I found out who they were, at what point could I, inform people of what was going on? And this was a big, so this reached media. I mean, we don't, at that time, CNN and Fox were, the primary. Social media hadn't really taken off yet. But we had a situation where we had a senior leader in the organization had the same last name as one of the soldiers captured. And so we had CNN showing up at his wife's home wanting to get an interview, get a comment, hey, is this your husband who's captured, all this kind of stuff. And so I can remember the frantic phone call of, what she should do. And it's kind of working through that. But, my actions and something like that is, hey, how do I keep everybody calm when one, they're seeing this stuff. CNN's, literally at our doorstep, seeing it on Fox News, and it was kind of a daily run. And so to try to stay ahead of that, I constantly, I'm a big believer in kind of the face-to-face, if not face-to-face, a phone call, especially something of this magnitude. Emails just really don't make any sense from my perspective. And so, having daily meetings and daily updates, bringing everybody together. And this unfortunately went on through the remainder of this deployment. And so there was still probably 6-7 months left in the deployment when this situation happened. And so that raised the anxiety level, quite a bit for the remainder of the time for all the families. And so, that initial few weeks, month, there was that daily touch point when, we would talk through stuff, talk what was going on, what we knew, letting the family share, hey, what do you know? What are you hearing? Let's try to paint this picture here. Then it turns into, well, let's bring lunch in and let's bring drinks. Let's make it kind of a community where, at least, we really started resting on each other. And it was a coping mechanism, actually, just really to come together. And I think, just a takeaway that I had with that is one is the honesty. Two is clear and then timely communication of getting what bad information never gets any better with time. And so and there's a lot of times I had no idea, and I'm trying to piece things together through my limited contact with my Ford leadership and the leadership that I had back at Fort Drum as well. But just letting the families know, like, hey, this is what I know, which is not much. And then just going into it seemed to at least provide a little bit of reprieve. And it helped me, maintain a level of trust with the families. It did not make anything any easier by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that constant drumbeat of honest, of clear, of timely communication, enabled, us back at Fort Drum to really, work through this and have the resilience, to get through the remaining 6-7 months. Going back to your original part, sorry, but about that service. Hey, no one runs to this position. No one is applauded or put up on a stage or necessarily given a medal for something like this. It's one of those kind of unsavory, unsung kind of positions that needs to occur. And I found satisfaction just by the families that would come. I guess that was the measure of success, as more people would come to try to hear and then get that message from the rear detachment out. And so that was then they would start looking to me as like, hey, he's in charge of us, and who's going to let us know then good, bad, or indifferent what's going on. So I don't need to depend on my husband, downrange, down in Iraq from informing me of what's going on, because I know Brian, we trust him. And so that was that was probably my measure of success in a difficult time.
Yeah. So for the audience, I've always said that the first casualty of war is the families. Guys, gals are going to go and fight and get wounded or die. That's not great. The families are always going to have that, that are going to be there's a lot of visible and invisible, seen and unseen wounds for families. And so Brian's going through the situation, and he's got a 9-month pregnant wife that is, or a brand newborn. I don't know, at what point, but it's a, and so that stress is borne by his family. It's obviously borne by the families of those soldiers who were missing in action. eventually later, Brian, I think they were found. Unfortunately, they were not alive, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It was um almost about 13 months after the incident, they were recovered. Mhm.
Yeah, that's a long time for families to suffer through this. Um, as well, for the rest of the battalion, scores of wounded and killed soldiers, service members, that Brian had to then care for those families. And you can, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the movie We Were Soldiers Once and Young. That's probably the best movie that shows the challenge of the families at home. And Brian and his family were there serving the families of the unit in such a manner. And God bless you for doing that. It's hard work, and I hate to say somebody's got to do it, and it's really good to have somebody good doing it. Yeah. And so let's shift to Latin America,
Good.
to Mexico City. I'm going to throw out some words. Second largest U.S. embassy in the world. What were you, 6 months? We were friends. You told me you were going to Mexico. I'm like, for the world? Like that's
Yeah.
I've never thought about going to Mexico City. Very important for a lot of problems that are coming out of Latin America: the drugs, narco-terrorism, peer competition, China, Russia, of course, transnational terrorism coming through the south border. Talk us through that very significant event and how you went to essentially a zoo of a whole bunch
Yeah.
of animals
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
figured
And,
it out.
being part of the Department of Defense, we have a small but very important role down there, but it's definitely not as publicized, because of the other agencies that are in the embassy, again, doing some just incredible work. And so my role, I was a leader of a small team, working out of the embassy. Sometimes I thought they just put us in the broom closet and told us just to kind of stay there, but my role out of that really, really small office, or just a handful of us there, was to inform and to communicate, across a large intercultural embassy staff. I mean, folks, I did not speak the language of really all of the organizations in there. And then there was up to 50 different representation of US government agencies down there. And so it was a steep learning curve as as I'm just trying to make my rounds, introducing myself, letting them know who I am and who I represent, and in our role and our mission down there. And a lot of that had to do with train our Mexican armed force partners. And so I would inform and communicate, hey, here's teams we have coming down to train these folks from these times. This is the kind of training that's going on. Some of it would need some approvals, but mostly it was a lot of collaboration. And in one particular, we had a program that we needed approval ultimately from the senior executive leader in the embassy. Uh, and I was told, like, hey, it's been approved in the past. This will be, just change the date on it and the signature block, walk it through, it'll get approved, kind of thing. And so I didn't know if that was one of those, initial, hey, let's let Brian kind of flounder through this and see how he does it. But I didn't really realize the effort of collaboration, some of the persuasive speaking, going back to my training, that was going to be required. Not even get to the top, the decision maker to sign the paperwork, but really at that staff level to work across the embassy, where sometimes I get the passive yes, where they would tell me yes, but then all of a sudden 24 hours later it was a no. Some folks, I'd walk into the office, it was a hard no. Some folks would, some different different people would just not even want to meet with me. And so it truly became an all-on effort for about 6 weeks as I walked, really from office to office, taking folks out to lunch, out for drinks, just trying to understand, their world. So I really had to take a step back, and, my initial, hey, just change the date in the signature block and walk it through, didn't seem to play out, as it maybe did in previous years. And so, where I found some success, obviously leaning on some of the, the folks that are leading, having the experience down there. And so active listening, asking them questions. Hey, how do we approach this? Let's whiteboard it and kind of figure out who the influencers really are within these different agencies, and how do we get to them and get their approval, so then we can kind of further go up the rung. And then, what's their drink, is it tequila or mezcal, or what do they like to eat? And so, we started this little mini campaign of taking folks out, getting them out of the embassy and out of everyone's silo, if you will, and of what they did, out of their cubicles, and just going back to a basic level of who you are as an individual, and then active listening, and really just getting into an interest of everybody that worked down there on behalf. Again, we're all together, U.S. Embassy, 50 some agencies, and we're doing the work for the U.S. government. So we're all on the same team, but sometimes we get narrowly focused on what we have to do that day to day. And so I think it was, again, I had a great team around me. Any leader that progresses in the military, has a great team around them, to help really think through those friction points. Obviously, my role as that leader was to run to that friction point. That could be a person, that could have been the paperwork, that could have been whatever. But then just taking a step back and learning from our lumps, and reattacking and going back at it again from a different perspective, ended up getting us the approval across the staff. And then, the other thing, that I learned out of that was like, well, hey, how is this program, helping these other agencies? Something that I was failing to communicate, like, hey, this is what this can do for your organization, and what we are providing if we get this funding and approval for it. And so that really, that initially kind of slipped my mind. And, but coming back to that, I was able to work some, work the signatures and the approvals through the staff. And then by the time I got to the chief decision maker and the executive there in the embassy, we already laid all the groundwork, where, it was essentially just a 2-minute interaction. I mean, I think he signed it in the hallway, kind of thing. And so that was, so that was my, my takeaway, is just that collaboration. Putting myself in the other agency shoes, and really trying to help them complete their mission and their purpose, with a program that I could offer, is something that I'll definitely take away going forward.
Yeah, and I'm navigating the second largest U.S. embassy in the world in Mexico City, with very real threats in that area, with the narco-terrorism is exceedingly violent. Very neat that you're able to navigate that and identify the human terrain. So for the audience, the military uses the terminology human terrain well, and it's an operating environment. You have to get in there and maneuver around the pitfalls and the obstacles and the swamps, or the highways that the people, the connectors, if you listen to like Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers, and just kind of reduce those friction points. I took that note. I thought that was really insightful, Brian. So you got the charge, the man in charge. You got him to make a signature. I'm curious, was it tequila or?
Well, I mean, at his level, I'm not taking him out for anything, but at the subordinate level, there was a lot of, it was probably 50-50, the mezcal and the tequila,
Yeah, that's great. So listen, we have a few more minutes and I want to open it up, but I'm getting a couple texts here. I'll let some people here chat, type in a question if you have anything you want to ask Brian, but specifically here. And so most of the folks on our call today haven't had these experiences. They can kind of understand them, through your analogies. But there's a lot of overlaps. There really are. And for the audience, there's a lot of lot of overlaps because of the skills required, and those skills that are required that made Brian successful in his military career will make him successful in the very next career, in the next career that's going to happen, that's going to start in just a few months. And so, and you can hear what those skills are: active listening, compassion, leadership, communication, identifying the human terrain, those influencers who can essentially make things happen. Those are the skills, learning the industry skills of whatever the industry is that you're attracted to and that draws you in, that scoops you up, is going to happen. That's easy. You've learned skills all your life, and so I'm really excited for you there. So think about that, audience, and then Brian, one question here texted to me is, how, let me choose here, 1 or 2. Okay. So, this is an easy one because we only have a few minutes left. This is the easy one. How are you going to introduce yourself to a stranger?
How am I going to introduce myself to a stranger?
Yeah, rando guy in the embassy in Mexico City.
Yeah.
How are you going to introduce yourself? Are you going to come from your history, what you're looking for, you as an individual? Because you hit on that. That was really powerful. Talk us through that.
Yeah. Gosh, great question, Will. I'm small kid from small town of Iowa. Hey, I'm Brian White, and this is I'm 20 plus years of a military background, anxious to get started and work hard and give my time and effort and treasure to an organization that values faith, family, integrity, and excellence, and I'll be all in in an operations role, in really working where, again, the development of the people, those individuals, and then how that team comes together to develop a process and a system within an organization, a company, to achieve the results, is really where my passion lies. And that's probably, how I would kind of start off, and then, take the barbs from there, just let them,
right.
come at me.
You've survived many barbs. And I'm here to tell you that the next stage of life probably will have a couple, but not nearly as bad as your first phase. And truthfully, every time I get one, I'm grateful, because it keeps you honest and keeps you kind of moving forward. So we're running out of time. I want to be honest. I want to be I want to hold to our time standard here. To the friends in the audience and to the clients of Bancroft, we hope this Patriot lunch has provided you an opportunity to enjoy a very intimate, small group dialogue with Brian White. He's a very accomplished veteran, as you heard. Brian freely chose to dedicate his life to serve, to fight for and defend our freedom and our way of life. Brian, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for your service. Thank you. On behalf of corporate America and Bancroft Capital especially, thank you for your service and sacrifice.
Hey, thank you, Will. I really appreciate this opportunity. And again, thank you for all the folks at Bancroft Capital. I'm one of hundreds of thousands of veterans out there who are just looking for that opportunity. I think once that opportunity is afforded, we bring value to any organization. Just our willingness to persevere, to grit, and just kind of work through some problem solving and bring some unique solutions to the table.
Yeah, right on. Exactly. And so to everyone, feel free to reach out to Brian. I'll follow up with an email that provides his contact information. Brian is in the transition process. He's going 4 months. That's 4 to 6 months, and then he's moving. He's probably going to stay in the Denver area. And you'll get a follow-up from this with an email, also with a replay link. I highly encourage you to share that with your ERGs or your veteran networks or your friend networks. And reach out to Brian so he can help understand industries out there and the roles that he best fit in. Thanks for attending, everyone. Stay tuned for the next quarterly Patriot Lunch, which will be on Thursday, August 10th. Feel free to forward that out to everyone and just continue to grow this network in support of transitioning military veterans. Thank you very much. Everybody had a great time. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, everyone.